We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The VUU, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Greetings, dear viewers. It is good to be with you on this here in Peekskill, New York, gray, almost snowy winter day. It is good to be with you. It is good to have some really exciting guests joining us, several of whom will be familiar to most of our viewers. It is good to be with you. I'm Michael Tino. As I said, I'm joining you from Peekskill, New York, and I don't have a lot to say other than that. So, Chris, how are you today?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Rivera. I'm joining you from Borinquen, which is the colonized island of Puerto Rico. And it's beautiful outside. It's about 84 degrees and sunny. And yeah, it's just good to be with you all. Dawn, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's cold here, and I didn't realize you were in Puerto Rico, and so now I'm a little grouchy. But good for you. I'm glad you're someplace where it's warm. Yeah, my house is in the middle of a painting project, so everything's up in the air. But other than that, things are relatively good here in South Jersey. Michael, back to you.
So as we begin today, we usually like to spend a few moments looking at what's going on in the Unitarian Universalist world. And as we begin to do so, we want to be extra tender and loving and hold in our hearts, especially all of those who loved Matthew Taylor, who died this week. Matthew was an amazing up and coming religious leader in our movement, a Black man or Black person who anyone who knew Matthew loved Matthew and was transformed by their presence in people's lives. And especially, we want to hold the community of Black, Indigenous, people of color, Unitarian Universalists, because Matthew's death is one in an unfortunate and long string of deaths of especially Black Unitarian Universalist leaders over the last 14 months. And there are a lot of people for whom it is hitting really hard right now. And so we want to hold individuals who loved Matthew and the community of which Matthew was a part in our hearts today. Are there other?
Can I add to that, Michael?
Please add to that.
I definitely wanted to add, the Matthew is part of so many different parts of our communities. And so I definitely am holding the seminarian community, because when you go through seminary, as you know, you go through with a cohort of folks, and Matthew was in that process. And so there's a cohort of, ministerial formation folks that you just expect to go through ministry with, right? You kind of start out together and you talk about your calling, and you talk about, what you're called to do and where you're called to be, and to have somebody who's part of that foundational part of your formation is hard. I mean, it's hard for everybody, but I especially, feel for that cohort of folks, and also our pagan Unitarian Universalist community, which, really needed and needs the just authentic, beautiful leadership that Matthew brought. It was real, and it was just beautiful, and the loss is just in so many. I mean, those are like the two that I can name, and there's just, and the one that you named, it's just so many places. QuianaDenae. Oh no, okay, I thought you were. So yeah, I just hold people tenderly. If you can support your religious professionals of color, which you can, I shouldn't say if, find a way to support your religious professionals of color right now in your communities. If you can hear my voice, that is our calling to you. Find a way and do it, make it happen.
Thank you, Chris. I don't know if there are other things that we should or need to add to the UU roundup this week. It's a big and heavy piece of news, and something that many people who I love are holding in their hearts right now, including several people on the VUU today. So do we have other things for our UU roundup, or should we introduce our guests?
The one thing I wanted to say is I know a bunch of folks met with the MFC and have been hearing, about final fellowship and all MFC things. So a shout out to folks who, got the news that they wanted, and a shout out to folks who got news that they maybe didn't want. It's all part of the process, and make sure you're reaching out to your support networks if you need it.
And shout out to the people who serve on that committee. That is no small task, and it is such a significant piece of how we how we train and how we, for lack of a better word, certify professional ministers in our denomination and in our faith, and their work is very important and largely thankless. So thank you, including Michael, who was on that committee.
You're welcome. As someone who does serve on that committee, which, if you don't know what that is the committee that brings ministers into relationship. We call it fellowship with our association of congregations, and holds ministers in relationship with our association of congregations. One of the most meaningful and also the hardest things that we do is really trying to witness the people that we're seeing and their journeys and their growing edges, and reflect that back to them. And sometimes people come to us and they're not yet ready to go out into the world of ministry, and it's hard to give people that news, but we always try very hard to give people ways to be better ministers. Even people who are ready and raring to go and like set to be in congregations, we give them ways to be better ministers too, because we all every one of us is on a lifelong journey of growth. So thank you for the thanks, and for the recognition. It's probably not something that I'm going to bring up because I do serve on that committee.
So how about our guests today?
Our guests today, we have guests, all of whom I think have been on The VUU before, and several of whom have been on The VUU more times than me. So we should get right to introducing our guests. Our guests today include the Reverend Meg Riley, co-moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association and Minister Emerita of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, who is the editor of this fantastic meditation manual, Shelter in This Place, Meditations on 2020. And along with Meg, we have QuianaDenae Perkins, former co-host of The VUU, seminarian and religious professional in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Danielle DiBona, the Reverend Danielle DiBona, chaplain extraordinaire, former CLF board member from Massachusetts. And QuianaDenae and Danielle are both contributors to this book.
As are you.
As am I. Yes, we have at least 4, and there's a little dog prancing about. I hear, and probably cats. Pets of all sorts are welcome on The VUU. So Meg, maybe we should start with you, since you edited and put together this collection. What was the inspiration to memorialize 2020 in this way?
Well, it didn't really start out that way. It started out as a book about grief. Back when I was at CLF, before you fantastic leaders took over, and I love those new videos, which I hadn't seen. They're really wonderful. We did an episode of Quest about That Is Not My Dog. We did an episode on Quest about grief. I'm betting on Danielle DiBona for that one. And I just saw that people in our movement. Oh, no one can hear that but me. Okay. So I thought that we had a lot to say about grief. So this was before the pandemic. And I suggested to Skinner House that I do a meditation manual on grief. And I happened to do it on a day when they needed to know what the next one would be. And they quickly said yes. And then almost as quickly, the pandemic started. And it got way more complicated than just being a book about grief. The pandemic was not the same pandemic for everyone. That became really quickly evidence that there were communities way more impacted than others. And then here in my hometown in Minneapolis, George Floyd was brutally murdered. And then the uprising happened and it became global. And so 2020 became really multifaceted. And so the book also became much more complicated. And we kept trying to finish it, but I was looking at a coup coming along, and so it finally finished January 7th. I said, okay, we can stop now. But 2020 really hasn't ended. And I think that, Matthew's death and the just tragic, horrific list of lost, beautiful Black leaders says to me what 2020 was about and what 2021 continues to be about, and every other year until we demand that stop. So anyway, so I was really moved by the complexity of what people sent in. And some of them, like Quiana's piece, are really celebratory and digging deep into the roots of resilience. Some of them are really about grief and loss. Some of them are about rage. Some of them are about Danielle's piece. I think you wrote right after the inauguration finally happened, and it's kind of okay, we've survived. And so it's a real mix of things. And I'm really some of the authors from different perspectives are here. And if you look at it, there are just so many perspectives in it, and there could be so many more. I was very sorry that we didn't have prisoners' perspectives in it, but when we started it, we thought we were going to do it really fast, and of course we didn't. But anyway, so I really was delighted with the contributions that came in, and I would love to have the writers who are here read what they contributed, just so that people get a sense of the variety of what's there.
I think that would be super. So QuianaDenae, if you're talking, you need to unmute yourself, and we would love to hear one of your poems from the book.
I don't want to start there though.
Okay,
I don't know if you've met me. I'm rather independent and autonomous. So I would be doing a disservice to my spirit if I just read that poem and didn't talk about my friend Matthew. I would be doing a disservice to my ancestors if I didn't talk about Alandria, Chester, Hope, Reverend Kimberly. I'm going to tell you all a story. For those of you who don't know me, my name's QuianaDenae. It's both parts, kind of like Linda Susan, Glenn Thomas, 2 names. And I remember being in St. Paul, which is home for me, at Blue Symposium and spending a great deal of time with Matthew. But at about midnight, Matthew, myself, and a couple of other folks got to have, at least one other person, got to have this master's class taught by Sophia, Reverend Kimberly, and Takia Amin. And they were talking to us about school and academia and this faith and this denomination. And finally, at about 2 a.m, we both were like, we have to be back awake in 5 hours. Like there's a line to which we can no longer function. And I remember riding the elevator up with Matthew, and both of us just like sensory, emotionally, spiritually, just full, because we had just got this master's class by these 3 amazing people. For those of you who don't know, me and Matthew were on Team Sankofa together. For those of you who don't know, any of the campaign work that you've seen come out of Blue, Black Lives, Unitarian Universalist in the last 2 years was work that was initiated most likely with Team Sankofa. So we're talking Kwanzaa, which was an 8-night celebration. You're talking Juneteenth, which was an 8-hour plus celebration. You're talking We Got Us, which is our celebration around the election. You don't pull off those kind of events if you don't have a tight-knit group of folks putting them together in the background. And so we spent a lot of time in principled struggle and conversation and dialogue. I tell you all of this to say, if you think that I'm okay, you're sadly mistaken. I'm not. but I know how to function. So I'm doing that. That seems really rational. If you are encountering people, non-white people, people of color who are a part of this denomination and faith, when Michael said be tender, I don't even think that word is accurate. It is don't leave footprints in the snow tender. Like that is how soft you need to walk. Because even if folks are not in that first ring of contact with Matthew, they're in this circle, or they're in this circle, and they're in this circle, or they've been asked to hold the grief of someone else who is in that inner circle. If you have not been impacted by one of these 5 deaths in the last 2 years, consider yourself lucky. Say your prayers and find somebody who has been impacted because they need help. Absolutely. I'm going to stop there. The poem I want to share with you, I want to share in Matthew's name. It is a poem called Clarity. I come bringing all of my gods, goddesses, and priestesses, all the ways of knowing, of honoring the goddess, of praising her, of naming her lighthouse instead of storm. I read the letters my ancestors wrote me, left for me on the bark of old trees, on rocks along riverbanks, on water fountains, back row bus seats, and Sunday bridge walks. I leave maps for my descendants. I name fireflies as a magic we could explain but choose not to. I tell them about the time I loved them, an active present voice. I make sure they know that hummingbirds, giraffes, and moose are real. Dear hearts, I tell them, time and gender are constructs. Go find the others and dismantle them all. Transformation is its own kind of math and magic. And to this point, I have never been equal parts anything. I have always been chaos mixed with melanin. I am autonomous and sovereign. I am a collapsed star, a morning spider web. I am blessed, highly favored, and anointed by my ancestors. Everything, and I do mean everything else, is simply a matter of Black joy and excellence, manifested and magnified. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, QuianaDenae, for that beautiful reflection on your amazing friend, and for that wonderful poem, which we should be clear is not actually in the collection. That's a new poem that you're sharing with us. You are such a gifted poet. I have several several collections back here behind me with your work in it. So thank you. Danielle, would you like to share something you wrote for this book?
Sure. I'm not sure it's appropriate for today, but maybe it's something to look forward to. It is a good day. Breathe. Take a breath and feel the weight of the world lift from your body. Remember that you survived. No, thrived. Find your deep soul, hold it in your hands, and thank it. Thank that soul for its protection and power. We have survived. We are not the same, yet we have survived, battered and bruised. It is a good day. Breathe. Take a breath and feel the weight of the world lift from your body. Let your heart be filled with peace. Let us each, in our own way, offer thanks to that which is most holy for its protection and love. I hope that we can hold on to those words and find them down the road. It's as if the grief never ends.
Thank you. And it's appropriate that this book started as a meditation manual on grief, on the collective grief that so many people were experiencing, that we are bringing this book to you on this day when that grief is so acute for our beloved here and elsewhere.
And is my mic on? Am I okay?
You are good, Meg.
Okay. I wanted to say that Danielle, because of her work as a hospice chaplain, was deep in the grief all year. And that was one reason I was really grateful that Danielle could be with us today, because Danielle has seen pieces of 2020 that some of us have not. And QuianaDenae, I'm sorry I got your name wrong. Apologize for that. I got it now. But I think a number of hospice chaplains are voices in this book. One of them, Megan Lloyd Joyner, sent, I don't know, 30 poems or something, just writing all the time because of the compelling nature of what she saw every day. And I know I was in close touch with Barb Grieve, and it just many people who were in very close up. And Danielle, besides what you wrote, I hope that today you can talk some about what you're such a good teacher, I think, about grief and life and holding it all.
It's interesting because in the last couple of weeks, what I work at a hospital as the palliative care chaplain. So I'm in the throes of it. What I'm finding now, which is interesting, is that people are suffering, they're grieving, they're feeling their grief more profoundly. They're stressed even more than they were during the days 20 months ago when our small hospital had 4 units of COVID patients. I think that grief is so deep that folks are in a crisis mode. It's hard to describe the feeling when I walk around the hospital, especially when I'm on the floors, not just in the common areas. The feeling that's both dark and stressful. There's so much pain. And now with a vaccine, most of the patients we're seeing with COVID are not vaccinated. And that's another whole layer of pain, of anger, really deep anger, that folks on the front lines have to put their lives at risk because someone decided that their needs or their feelings were more important than the community. In the early days of the pandemic, there was no time to focus and no time to process. Our staff were full speed ahead. A lot of them worked double shifts when our colleagues got sick with COVID. Many of our staff were making gowns to wear out of bed sheets because we didn't have enough PPE. Nobody had enough PPE. We had to wear our N95 masks for a minimum of 5 days. And if you don't want to take them home, you can clean them in the office before you, or at the desk before you use them tomorrow. There's so many stories like that that really bring to the forefront the lack of compassion that people have for each other, the lack of compassion that the general public has for people who work in the hospital, especially now after, all the parades and the clapping and all of that are finished. I think that, I know that people will be traumatized for years to come, not just hospital workers. I know that, common people in the street, but certainly the people I work with.
Thank you for bringing that perspective up, Danielle. I really appreciate it. There's the hospital piece, but as a faith community, as a faith leader, I'm in training, but I don't think any of us, no matter where you are in the process, were prepared for COVID and the grief of COVID. Like, how do you hold a funeral online? Like, it was like a whole new set of learning for all of us. How do you help people grieve when you can't hold their hand, when you can't look them in the eye in the same way? So where you were experiencing it from this kind of hospital and medicalized perspective, I think we were in the brick and mortar, or in CLC in the non-brick and mortar, which is also beautiful, experiencing it from this different perspective, that all the tools or things that I had learned to administer pastoral care were no longer there, right? I couldn't come to your house and sit on your couch with you and have a cup of tea. So we had to be really inventive on our end about how we do the work that we know needs to get done. And the reason I submitted to this book and appreciated this book is because all of us as a collective culture, we're trying to find ways to engage this thing that we had never prepared to engage. We needed a book, a manual, a roadmap to kind of walk through what grief was looking like in the moment, a snapshot, a picture. And I really feel like Shelter in Place is a snapshot of 2020's grief moment. And I think that if we had to write this book in 2021, it would absolutely be a different book. It would not even be the same book because our grief has morphed so much in such a short amount of time. Many of us, we don't even know folks who have lived through long-term sustained grief like this, right? Like, we all know how to have grief punches. Someone passes away, we deal with that. But this is like a grief bear hug. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't like the tap. This is like the hug, y'all. So how do we get used to being hugged in grief? How do we get used to having some part of us always lingering in that unknown space? How do we have the skills to let go and move forward in the mix of it all? So I'm just babbling, but I just want to say I understood how it was being experienced from a medical community, and just know that we were experiencing it in a different way in the kind of everyday community. My friend Don.
Yeah, I want to affirm what QuianaDenae just said, and it's just been a real challenge. So many of us had to suddenly figure out electronic communication and make it accessible to portions of our congregations and our communities that just so far had not bothered with it, figured, I'm too old, I don't want to learn all that stuff. And now if they needed to connect with people, this is going to have to be how they did it. But I remember when this first started and we were talking about what QuianaDenae was just talking about with grief as a bear hug. And one of the things that I was forefront of mind for me was a certain population of gay men who went through something like this in the 80s. where everyone was dying. Everyone was dying. I have friends who went to, 100 funerals a year in San Francisco and in New York. Reverend Kim Crawford Harvey, who serves our congregation at Arlington Street Church in Boston, her first ministry was in Provincetown, Massachusetts in the 1980s. And she did 60 funerals her first year. And so, for whatever reason, I was really, really lucky, or I've been really, really lucky in the congregation that I served, that we've had one person succumb to COVID, and that person was significantly ill in palliative care in a nursing home already, and it was she was sort of in the waiting room of the next phase of existence, and there are people who think that it was probably a blessing. She'd been waiting to go for a long time. But I have colleagues who have had years like that one Kim described, where it's just funeral after funeral after funeral after funeral, and now we can't do the things. We can't hold people's hands. We can't hug them, or we couldn't. We're getting to places now where we know how to manage that risk. But I am sure there is a cohort of gay men of a certain age for whom this is all far too familiar. And it is going to affect us as a society, as a larger culture, in the same way the Depression did. People came out of the Depression with weird new habits, like saving tinfoil. How many people know someone who saved tinfoil, right?
I saved tinfoil.
String. What was with the string? Rubber bands, right? All that stuff. Newspapers. I don't know why, but newspapers, right? So, we might come out hoarding N95 masks and toilet paper. I don't know. But it's going to affect us as a global culture. And what I see, an interesting thing that I see happening after this year of isolation, is that everybody is convinced that they're the only one suffering like they are. There's this sort of, we're somehow behind other people, and I see this among colleagues who say, yeah, my congregation is convinced that they're not doing enough, that they're not doing it right, that they need to be more forward ahead on this whole stuff, and everybody is saying that, and it's like, no, we're not alone, and we're not unique, but we've forgotten how to connect with each other. We used to go to group things and regional things and Ferry Beach and Murray Grove and all of that stuff, and we haven't seen each other, so we haven't had those conversations, and so we're feeling more isolated again. And all of that to say, thank you for putting this book together, Meg, and thank you for the contributors. Boy, oh boy. It's been a year, and God bless you, Danielle. I can't even imagine trying to be a hospice chaplain or a palliative care chaplain in times like this. So thank you. I rambled. Sorry. Somebody save me from the silence, please.
I think Danielle and Meg both were
QuianaDenae,
trying to say something.
you and our two perspectives just meld so well together, going from the community of the hospital and the community of the church. We dealt with the immediate grief and deaths, and the church dealt with the repercussions of that. And we didn't know how to deal with it either. Standing outside of an ICU room while somebody was dying alone, and nobody holding their hand and no family present was something that we didn't know how to deal with. And when we finally got little iPads, we still couldn't go in the room. So they had to say goodbye to their loved ones while we stood outside the room with an iPad, and across the room was the patient in the bed. So yeah, these things are all tied together. And I think without the religious communities out on the street, the hospital staff would not have survived. Maybe they weren't churchgoers. There was no church to go to for a long time, and then online church. But there's just such, in my opinion, there was such a close connection between the work we did in the hospital and then the work the religious community did to save the people who had survived in more ways than one.
I wanted to mention that Manish Mishra Marzetti did write a piece about how the COVID crisis brought the AIDS crisis to mind. It's a beautiful piece, and I actually hope that Manish could be here to read it. I also was ordained in the middle of the AIDS crisis, and like this current one, it was politicized in ways that made it extremely horrible and dangerous. And it did bring it to mind. I did not lose as many friends as my gay male friends did, who, if you talk to someone like Mark Bellatini, who lost literally, I mean, because Mark loves people and has hundreds of friends, he just lost friend after friend and lover and partner, and I mean, just, you know, so it was a terrible time. And this, what I wanted to say is, Danielle was talking about people not being compassionate with hospital workers and medical people. I'm also hearing colleagues talk about congregants kind of acting like assholes right now. And I'm not in a congregation, so I can say this, like, for God's sake, think about the stress that your religious professionals are under and be kind to everyone. I mean, I just can't believe the petty stuff that I am hearing people complain about, being bored. And I mean, I'm sorry, we're all bored, like, get over it. And so anyway, I just wanted to say that because I don't have a congregation to punish me for it. But I am just appalled when I hear about board members telling ministers or religious professionals that they're not doing a good job. People are so stressed out, particularly parents, but everybody. And yes.
Tanner, can you put us both on the screen real fast, me and Meg? Let's chat, because me and Meg, we're in the same spot. I have an obligation to a community. Like, I love me some Ann Arbor, but at the same time, I get to be human. Like, I get to have, as much as I'm trying to hold your hand through this experience, I'm also in the maze of grief as well. And if I can't see your principle number one, my connected humanity, that my experience I'm trying to walk you through and be in, if you can't respect that, there's already a fundamental spiritual disconnect.
Amen.
And so, Meg, when you're talking, and, you know, other folks have other obligations, I'll just simply say, like, exerting a boundary, telling you what I need to do to keep myself safe. If the first time you've had to hear and acknowledge and honor one of my boundaries is right now during COVID, one, there was already a problem. Two, if somebody giving you a boundary if somebody's saying, I'm at my capacity, I can no longer share this space with you, I can't do this anymore, I need to step away. If that's hard for you to hear from your faith leader, from your school's principal, from the nurse at the clinic who's just trying to help you because you got the sniffles, then there is already a problem. Check your humanity. If you make room for your own humanity, because in the end, it makes room for other people's humanity. When I see people sending those nasty grams, asking for unnecessary things that just aren't adding to the thrivehood of the possibility of our thriving, I just really want to look at them and just be like, and ask the question, how is this contributing to our thriving?
Amen. Amen.
And if you don't have an answer, then it's probably not contributing to our thriving.
Amen.
I won't give an examples because there isn't any to give, because I'm really good about my boundaries. I don't know if y'all know that I'm Princess Boundary over here, but man, let me tell you. But it's hard. I'm going to say this though. It's hard being a person who holds boundaries when no one else around you is holding boundaries, because then it makes you look like you're not doing it. Like if I say I need to step away to grieve, but everybody else grieves publicly, then it looks disordered, right? Not that I've done anything wrong and that other people have done anything wrong. We have a culture that really props up things that are unsimilar, right? We even have a song, right? Which one of these things is not like the other, right? But the truth is, making something the other doesn't make it good or bad. It just means that for me, my grief moves through my body in a silent and a private, and yours moves through public. Doesn't mean I've done something wrong, right? So to come back to boundaries, since I'm on this little bus, if I have boundaries and nobody else around me has boundaries, it looks like I've done something wrong, when in truth, I'm the one who's acting really healthy. And if I hold you accountable to not disrespect my time, my energy, my resources, I'm not doing something wrong. I'm protecting me to protect you. Because you don't want to see me when my boundaries aren't being kept. No one's here for that. Trust and believe. No one's here for that. And just when somebody says trust and believe, what they really mean, y'all, I'm gonna let you into some code real quick. Trust and believe is QuianaDenae speak for mess around and find out. If you want to question, if you have a question, the answer is not going to be favorable for you. There's another phrase, you can Google that, ask a millennial. There's a whole nother phrase. I'm not going to dip into that one. I'm gonna get off this pulpit and simply say, if you want to test people's boundaries because you're unsure about things happening in your own life, if you want to question if somebody should have worn that shirt, or some of the feedback Matthew used to get from his beautiful congregation was that he was too dark in the background on his screen and they couldn't see him. So he went and bought special lights to make sure that his face was brighter so people could see him. This is the kind of SHIT, when we say microaggressions and you want to know what those are, that's what we're talking about. So if you're tired, if you don't want to hear that song again, if you're tired you want that chair moved, you want everyone to be required to have a mask and be vaccinated. If you want us to be a beloved community, act like a beloved community member. It goes part and parcel. They coexist together like we're supposed to coexist together. I'm off.
We miss you. We miss you on the VUU.
Yes.
Here on the VUU.
I'm so lucky I have a job and that I'm not going nowhere, because man, I'll be saying some sassy stuff.
And I have some words for anyone who wants to tell my Black siblings that their beautiful skin is too dark for the camera.
I wish I could tell you I was being funny.
Man.
I wish I could tell you I was being funny.
No, I didn't think you were. I wish I have some words. And they are not.
I have some words too, but again, we probably can't use them.
One of the things, getting back to the book, that I appreciate, that it's a book, right? It's a book. It's going to be on my shelf forever. And I appreciate that the feelings in it are as strong and as real as they are. That you chose. The grief is strong and real. The sorrow is strong and real. The rage is strong and real. The joy is strong and real, and largely like unmellowed and unprocessed. And I so appreciate that it got frozen in the book in that form, because hopefully, like 10 years from now, we will have processed. we will have mellowed, and we can look back and go, oh yeah, I lived through some stuff. I lived some serious stuff. And the piece that I wrote, which is a call to worship that is at the end of the book, goes with some of the themes that you all were talking about, because one of the things that I was struggling with was here in New York, especially where we were sort of the epicenter of the first wave of COVID. The bricks and mortar congregation I serve is a mile from a hospital, and it was one of the hospitals that had tents outside and refrigerator trucks because the morgues were overfull. All of the hospitals here did, and people were being sorted into whether what they did in society was essential enough to be let out of their house or not. And it was such an affront to that first principle, to that recognizing that each one of us has inherent worth and dignity. That I heard a reflection on it on this given by Stephen Lee Williams, former CLF volunteer chaplain and all around amazing person. And Stephen's reflection made me write this, so I'm going to share my my reading, if that's okay. It's called Essential Services. You are essential. Your life is essential. Your body is essential. Your presence here in community is essential. Here we mourn the dead. Here we rage at injustice. Here we learn and grow, stretch and challenge ourselves. Here we plan and build the beloved community. Here we remember what is greater than ourselves. Here we celebrate joyous milestones and mark the seasons turning. Our work here is essential because we are essential. Not just those of us who are here, but all of our siblings of every faith, color, and identity. All of us are essential. Come, let us worship, connected, whole, essential.
We need that. We need to remember that we need each other, right? That we need everyone to survive, and that what's harming one of us is harming us all.
Yeah, and in this era of vaccines, I will say that there are two people I know who, when I heard they got a vaccine, or when I saw that they got a vaccine, because one of them I was there for, I cried. And one of them, of course, is my daughter, who is only fully vaccinated as of last week, because she's 8. But one of them was you, Danielle, because you were there on the front lines with people, and I was so scared. I was so scared for you. And so I'm glad you're here. But you were one of the first people I knew who got that shot. And
Thank you, Michael. I was scared too.
I think what
Makes me
QuianaDenae
cry.
said about affirming humanity, I see that in all of you that I'm looking at right now, and I heard so much about it last night at Matthew's vigil, and saw it in the leaders there. And I think it's just such a vulnerable time for all of us, where we do profoundly know how much we need each other. And if ever there's a time to think carefully about whether or not what we're offering contributes more love to the world or diminishes love, I would just really encourage every single one of us, because our defenses are thin. And so to not make each other exert boundaries by exerting them ourselves, and really just starting with the premise, particularly right now, as others have said, that within Unitarian Universalism, the Black, Indigenous, people of color, especially religious leaders, Star King students, and others are so vulnerable. But also that really it's just a tender time to lead with kindness and compassion, or silence, because sometimes, honestly, silence is the best I can get to. So I just kind of have to keep my mouth shut. And I'm really, I'm happy that the writers are here, and I want to thank all of the people who contributed. I think that the book does contain a multitude, and it made me so grateful to be able to experience the complexity of something and not just have my own experience, but shared. And I think we're gonna, QuianaDenae, you're gonna read your poem, right?
I am. I want to thank my this community. I'm in many communities, and one of them is the Church of Larger Fellowship. Y'all are my peeps. And so I'm honored always to be in this space with you all and to be in this level of healing. I don't know why my poem was chosen to be almost close to the end. I'm excited, but I just know I'm like, so it's a good closer poem. Whatever season you're in right now, family, I just, it's the season you're in right now. And we are blessed that the earth keeps turning and our hearts keep growing and healing and mending. So I offer the closing today with the poem called The Turning. Now, I will be clear that what's in the book is the edited version, and what I have in front of me is the pre-edited version. So there may be some nuanced differences, but the message is still clear. The Turning. At the last turning, I was invited to a meeting among the sun, the earth, and the moon. The sun asked, "Do you have space in your heart for a great light?" The earth said, "I will hold you down if you are willing." And the moon said, "I will guide you if you need it." And it was easy to say yes to the energies of balance. So for a turning, we have found ourselves dancing. The sun took the lead, sharing a drop of their luminescence, held deep in their heart when the darkness loomed, held on the tips of my fingers when others called for it. I came to understand space. I understood what it meant to be a beacon, learning the nuance of shadow and light. The earth kept her word. I was planted deep and rooted hard. I was uprooted, replanted, and loved until I was healed enough. Until I was healed and able to feel the small tug of soil calling me down, demanding I grow again. And the moon, a faithful sister auntie, stayed by my side, always hovering, always playing and laughing, reminding me that joy takes many forms and keeps no schedule, reassuring me with loving pats and ooh child whispered commentary, a subtle and wanted companion on this journey. And the turning is coming again. The sun said, "Daughter, you have done well." The earth said, "Healing, healer, you always have a home." The moon said, "Beloved shadow worker, we will cast new spells soon." We radiate the light. We rotate the life. We revolve back into love. And we enter a new season of possibilities. Ashe and amen.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.